know, I just kind of thought of Anne as, well, what everybody was saying, that she was just kind of this crazy, loony woman.
I saw this old lady walking with a cane and bright white hair, and I noticed on her lapel she had a medical cross with a marijuana leaf, and it just struck me as so bizarre.
I'm from Tangipahoa Parish in Louisiana. My maiden name is Edwards, and the Edwards were always very active in Tangipahoa. My father was a mayor. When he died in 1966, he was the mayor of Ponchatoula at that time. Since the late 1800s until today, except for one 20-year period, an Edwards has been the sheriff. Right now, the sheriff is Danny Edwards, a brother of John Bell Edwards, the new governor of Louisiana. These are all cousins that I grew up with. So being political has been part of my nature. I've always expected to be a part of the process. In 1970, we had just moved out to this area, and at the time we moved, our congressman was George H.W. Bush. He was a congressman for here from 1966 to 1970. In 70, he gave that up to run for the Senate. And we had a wide open primary to take his place in Congress. And my husband knew Bill Archer. So we had one of the very first coffees for Bill Archer when he ran for Congress in 1970.
When I first got involved in politics in the cannabis reform movement, I didn't talk to my parents for most of a year because they were totally against it. They're very conservative, longtime Republicans.
One thing I can say, I think I've set a record, because after every primary you have a precinct convention. And I have conducted or attended every precinct convention in Precinct 315 since 1970. My husband and I were very united on this issue. We've been very united on politics. I've always said that I came to Texas in 1946 to go to the University of Texas, and there I met Bob, and as they say, the rest is history. And he not only made me a Texan, but a Republican. The whole idea of our drug policy reform started in August of 1990 when our son Richard told us that marijuana was good for him. And if there's anything I didn't want to hear, it was that. Because I had fallen hook, line, and sinker for all the lies and propaganda the government had put out about marijuana. We soon learned about a group called DPFT, Drug Policy Forum of Texas. And they used to meet once a month. I did not know cannabis or weed or anything like that. And the more we studied it, the more we learned about it, the more we realized that it was not only good medicine, but that much harm was being done by the laws. And the thing that I find such a mystery to me, such a mystery, is why I find Republicans just enforcing this law like it was handed down from Moses. And it was a law that came about during FDR, during the New Deal in 1937.
My mom came from Ponchatoula, Louisiana, which is just north of New Orleans. We're talking the deep, deep, deep South. She grew up during very racist times. And I think now she is trying to do something about that history of racism and to keep it from continuing under the guise of drug laws.
I grew up with a bad law that said whites and blacks couldn't go to school together. That was called the Jim Crow laws, the segregation laws that came about, promoted in the South by the white Democrats. And that was bad law, and bad law needs to be changed. And now the fact that we have the bad law of the drug war, which has given us the new Jim Crow, is just haunting. It's caused so much harm to people. And there's another side to this, because Republicans have always been the fact that they are pro-life. And I think it is pretty hypocritical to say you are pro-life and anti-medical marijuana. Pro-life has to mean more than just preventing an abortion. Pro-life has to mean the quality of life. And that is nice, we do want to prevent an abortion, but you prevent an abortion and then you have a child come who needs marijuana to control their seizures from epilepsy? Are you really pro-life when you say they can't use it? So to me, it is very hypocritical to say that you are pro-life and anti-medical marijuana. RAMP came about it was October of 2012. And we were in Los Angeles at a normal convention, and I was asked to fill in on a panel. And of the 5 of us on the panel, we realized 3 of us were Republicans. After being on the panel, we started talking about it. We came up with RAMP, Republicans Against Marijuana Prohibition. Very brazenly just copied how LEAP got its name, which is Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. And when we got back to Houston, we had the good fortune of meeting some young Republicans, we call them YRs, and 3 in particular, John Balcom, Zoe Russell, and Jason Miller. And I've always said they took the idea of RAMP and they gave it the wings with which to fly.
So I first met Ann Lee in 2012, leading up into the Republican primary. We were at a training session to learn how to scan voters' IDs as they came in to the convention. And I saw she was wearing a medical marijuana pin. So I went up and introduced myself, and we sat in the parking lot for about 45 minutes and shared each other's stories. She told me about her family and her son that was an activist in California, who I was well aware of, and was happy to get to know Ann and the work she was doing in Texas, and from the beginning wanted to be a part of that. We talked about introducing resolutions to our precinct convention so that they could go up into the state party platform potentially. And as you may know, when you talk to some older Republicans about marijuana policy, it's a rather taboo subject and they're not really interested in hearing you. So after having little to no success in 2012, we decided that let's take this to the next level. Let's build out this organization. Let's get some marketing material together. Let's build a Facebook page, get an online and social media presence. And so I reached out to a couple friends of mine, Zoe Russell and Jason Miller, who both have experience both in web design and digital media and things like that. So Zoe and Jason coming on helped develop the logo, helped develop the brand, helped push RAMP out to the masses, and was really an awesome opportunity for RAMP to take that next step.
Well, I bought into what our government had been telling us, that it was bad and it had no benefits. It was going to only cause crime, and it led to other drug use, and that it wouldn't be good for our country. I met Ann Lee when I was running for the position of State Republican Executive Committee woman, and she ran against me. And she gave this most impassioned speech. It was wonderful. By the end of her speech, I was like, oh, this woman should actually get it. Maybe I just need to drop out. And then I remember her closing line that most of us think of her as a one-topic person, and that she was much more than just promoting marijuana. And my mouth just dropped open. Every time I would see her, I would just dread it, because she would just come up and, are you going to help us get this legislation through? Are you going to provide a resolution to help us? You know, we need to get this passed. And she was so adamant about it. I just was very apprehensive whenever I would run into her. And so I would send her articles about why marijuana was bad and all the propaganda that's out there. And then one day she just kind of pushed me to the limit. And I thought, you know what? I am going to take some time. I had a couple of hours. I was going to do some investigation, and I'm just going to shut her up for good, because I just got so tired of being accosted by Miss Ann Lee whenever she would see me. And I started doing my investigation, and oh my gosh, I couldn't believe what I found out. It was just amazing. How could I have been so duped? And then it just started morphing my opinion about marijuana. And as the more I found out, the more I realized that I had been lied to by my government, that I was being a part of an injustice to my society.
And I grew up as a policeman's daughter, and they used to talk about all the horrors of marijuana and how it led to crime, degradation, was a gateway drug, all this stuff. None of that was true. It was all government hype. And Ann started explaining Jim Crow laws, and I thought, here we live in Houston, Texas, one of the world's largest medical facilities in the world, and the doctors aren't allowed to prescribe cannabis for nausea if the other medicines don't work.
As a person who is in natural foods and natural health foods and vitamins, etc., I might need this one day. And I think about my children and all those people in prisons that for smoking marijuana that is less harmful than alcohol. What are we doing?
The Republican Party needs to get more state chapters a ramp in the fact that it'll help unify the party, because a lot of people don't want to follow the party now because of their stance on marijuana.
We have a medical marijuana program on the books in Texas, the Compassionate Use Act, which was sponsored by Republicans in the House and the Senate, signed into law by the Republican governor. So we're very excited and looking forward to expanding this bill to include additional qualifying conditions, as well as adjusting the ratios of the various cannabinoids that can be used.
I think RAMP needs to ramp up our interaction with the elected officials. You know, one of our biggest challenges is getting elected officials to actually listen. They don't listen, and thus, as we're seeing right now, what is happening in our national election, that they don't hear us.
25 states, 25 or 26, have marijuana laws. We'd like to get it up to 38, because once it's past a certain number, then it'll become law of the land.
I think this November we'll see 4 or 5 additional states legalize adult use of cannabis, adding to the 4 states that already have adult use laws. So that's going to be the change that's going to shift the legislature in Texas, seeing other states, seeing the revenues they're pulling in from the sales of marijuana, the creation of new businesses, new jobs, especially when we have a depressed oil and gas economy currently in Texas. That's a drain on the budget, and there's going to be gaps to fill. So I think it's an alternative resource, and hopefully they'll see the success in other states with their programs experimenting as the laboratories of democracy, and hopefully we'll also see the federal government take action and have some sort of descheduling or completely removal of penalties.
I'm an alternate delegate to the National Convention. I am going to Cleveland. Another friend who's a delegate herself is also on the RAMP board, and we're both going to wear RAMP t-shirts, and we have some RAMP decals we're going to pass out. And we just hope to take the RAMP message to Cleveland.
I have a lot of respect for my mom, and I did for my dad when he was alive, for them coming out for the legalization of marijuana, because I know it put them at odds with most of their longtime GOP friends. So, for me, I've always believed in legalization, but for them, it was quite a big deal for them to come out for legalization.
One of the main duties of RAMP is to help people realize that Prohibition is not conservative. If you are a true conservative, you do not support Prohibition. Prohibition is a symbol of the nanny state, where the government tells you what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot use.